I'm glad somebody did. So, the first film that we're going to review this month is LORO. Annie, what did you make of it?
Right, so LORO, to tell you a bit about it, is a new film by Paolo Sorrentino, known best perhaps right now from the HBO series The Young Pope, and also the newer season, The New Pope, that's been on my Twitter feed because there was some topless pictures of Jude Law resurfacing. I don't know why. He's rather old, but for some reason people seem to be having like infatuation with these religious leader characters. Have you watched Fleabag with Andrew Scott getting all the attention?
I haven't got up to that section of it, but I'm well aware of the hot priest phenomenon.
There we go. Anyway, so LORO is a fictional biopic of Silvio Berlusconi that covers about the years between 2006 and 2009. Berlusconi is, of course, played by Paolo Sorrentino's favorite actor, Tony Servillo. I pronounce it like
Servillo,
Spanish. Yeah, known, for example, from Sorrentino's previous film. And my personal favorite, that I'll be talking about a bit more about later, La Grande Bellezza, The Great Beauty. Now, in Italy, which I found interesting, LORO is actually two films. So it's LORO 1 and LORO 2. In UK market, we have a cut version, which is about 3 hours long or something similar to that, but two and a half, something like that. But the actual original piece is, I think, 4 hours. So there's about an hour missing on the version that we have. It still retains that kind of two-part story structure, although from what I've read, it's slightly different. Like it's organized differently in the original film. So things that are happening like towards the end of the film in the UK cut are actually like already on the first film and stuff like that. And it's not divided in acts. It kind of naturally flows into the first part to the second one. The first part, we are introduced to Sergio, who is a businessman and a questionable talent scout. He's effectively managing a group of escorts whom he is using to bribe local politicians and decision makers. And he has this growing hunger for power, and he gets like a revelation that the person he needs to befriend is Silvio Berlusconi, who is at the time the Italian prime minister. And he is, of course, notoriously known for his corruption and for the sleazy antics he has towards young women. Now, the second part of the film then focuses, or I would even say like the 2/3 of the film focuses on Berlusconi's story, which is built around his failing marriage and also his disgust in being in the opposition in the local Italian politics. So he's trying to get back into power and also to win back the estranged wife's heart. And the character I found was a bit more sympathetic than I would have imagined of a satire of Berlusconi. I think it's part with the actor being quite lovable, but it's still very funny. It's still making fun of him, but it does make him a bit more human character than I would imagine if this would be made of Trump or something like that.
I think I agree with that. The way it characterises Berlusconi. I'll speak about the Berlusconi character first, just because you've mentioned it there. I think it's interesting the way it characterises Berlusconi. I think you're right in the sense that there is a hint of sympathy there, but I think it's actually I think it's been quite clever about it in that, you know, Berlusconi is seen as this kind of like larger than life character in the media. You know, these ridiculous antics and, you know, you couldn't make it up type stuff going on in and around his life. But I think what's very clever and quite skewering about this film is he's really made out to be, underneath it all, a pathetic old man. And there's quite a lot of scenes and utterances by other characters that speak to that, and I think that's what the fictional, you know, because obviously it's very heavily fictionalized, even if it is taking bits from reality, and I think that's something it did with Berlusconi, which is really, really interesting. The script kind of captures this way with words the man has, because, you know, love him or loathe him, the man knows how to tell a joke. It might be a horrendously offensive racist joke, but he's got an understanding of comic timing, and it kind of captures that. Well. yeah, right. So I think what it does with his character is very interesting, and overall I really liked the film. A lot of visual metaphor woven in there, which I think you'd probably expect out of Sorrentino. I think anybody who's seen Paolo Sorrentino's work will kind of recognise this, very much as a film that comes from him. The only criticism I do have with it is a little bit the structure. I didn't feel it flowed from one part to the other. So it flows from this sort of this basically small-time, petty, white-collar crook, basically.
Yeah.
Very quickly, it then shifts gear and goes to Berlusconi. And to me, it felt a little bit jarring, and I think that might be a function of the fact that originally, as you said, in Italy, it was released as 2 parts.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a bit missing there. It gets past it because, as you pointed out, it happens quite early on, and then we begin to focus on the Berlusconi character directly. So I think it gets past it, but it is a little bit of an adjustment at the start. I was wondering what you thought about in terms of how it painted that character. Because obviously we've spoken about the structure, I've said a little bit there, but what did you feel it was trying to maybe say about Berlusconi?
So, like I said, it portrays like a softer version of him that I would expect, but it's also made into this like a caricature. So with all the makeup and all the smiling he does, that is very, very much of him. It's obviously there to make us laugh and ridicule him. But it is also, I think, like you said as well, it's acknowledging that he's not a stupid man. Like he's cunning, and he definitely knows how to call people. So it's acknowledging those traits that actually got him into power. But what I found interesting is he's been kind of projected against a younger generation. And the young people in the film are, I think, continuously kind of rejecting him and kind of noticing what he does and then just not falling for his tricks. And that's something that's saying a lot about the Italian situation at the moment and the situation in the world that it is, that young people are just understanding the world a bit differently than the older crowd. And for example, with like all this economic stuff and the climate change and things like that, it's actually like the younger generation that's taken steps forward into making change. And then I think that's what Sorrentino is also trying to say, or saying in the film, is that there's this middle age group that's still kind of sucking up to him, but that's not going to take you anywhere. You have to kind of wake up and see what he's doing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you've got it absolutely bang on there, because there's a very interesting contrast. There's kind of 3 generations in the film, right? You've got the old man Berlusconi and a lot of his cronies. You've got Sergio, the character, who's kind of like trying to get into Berlusconi's circle, and he's not an old man, but he's certainly of a slightly older generation than this kind of large cabal of young women who he basically kind of ropes into like coming to this Sardinian mansion to try and kind of capture Berlusconi's attention.
Yeah, and what I found interesting, sorry to interrupt you, but like they are, there's this scene where they're sniffing cocaine, and then someone says that's like the old school drug, like nobody uses that anymore. And then Sergio says like, well, these women love the old school stuff, and those are the women that go for Berlusconi as well.
Yeah, and I found just that contrast between the generations, I think, worked very well. And this is where a lot of these like really weird visual metaphors come in. Like, so this isn't a spoiler because it's literally the opening scene of the film, but like the film opens in a very strange way, right? It opens at what we then become aware of the fact that it's Berlusconi's Sardinian mansion.
Yeah.
And basically what happens is the sheep wanders in, and like the air conditioning keeps going down, and it's watching, some rubbish game show from one of Berlusconi's TV channels that he owns, and it basically starts shivering, and then the thing collapses dead. It is the most bizarre opening, but it actually makes more sense when you get into it. Like, I kind of took it, not to get kind of like, maybe too Sude's corner about this for those who have read Private Eye, but it kind of felt like a metaphor for the Italian people and the way that the sort of environment that Berlusconi creates. Mm. And then you've got Sergio, this kind of middle generation, who basically have been living with this corrupted leadership, this corrupted system, and you can see the effect it's had on them. Whereas the youngsters who are rejecting him as this pathetic old man, obviously then start to show him up for what he is, or at least they managed to break down the artifice that he has created, which has intoxicated a certain generation and why he got into power in the first place. And I think the way he's done that with visual metaphors, the script, the characters, I think it's all really well done. It's really well worth seeing primarily for that, really, beyond even the script, because Tony Servillo as Berlusconi, he gets quite a lot of good lines as well, which are not things that Berlusconi has said, but you can totally imagine him saying them. It's really captured the essence of him and what appeals about him, whilst at the same time really breaking him down and tearing him apart. And I think it does that superbly.
One thing I'm quite interested in here is this, I haven't seen the film, but I'm just wondering, is there a possible defamatory element to this? I mean, are they careful to not name him as Berlusconi, for example, or are they presenting it as his real life, or is it a kind of dramatisation of his real life, or an out-and-out comedy?
So he is referred to by name, and there's no doubt that it would be, because there's scenes where he brings in talks to footballers who are meant to be signing for AC Milan and things like that. So there's no doubt about it. They've tried to cover themselves very well for that, because there is a monster disclaimer at the start of the film, like an absolutely monster before it goes into the opening sheep scene that we've discussed. About how the classic. These are fictional people. They're based. Any similarities to real life characters is coincidental. But when you go to see the film, you'll see that they stylize that text in a way that kind of pokes fun at that idea, because everybody knows it's about Berlusconi. So they're probably legally covered, but I can't imagine Silvio is going to be very pleased with this film. Let's put it that way.
So LORO, if you want to see it, is currently running in Filmhouse. If you like any other Sorrentino stuff, you'll definitely like this one, so it's well worth a watch.